All right, so this week we'll look at some Purim Torah from the Sfas Emes. We'll try to get through two short pieces, but as we're going to see, he packs a lot into two short pieces. So we'll have to sort of unpack it and go through them. So this is from I think a set of shiurim that the Sfas Emes gave about 150 years ago. Um, all about Purim and really sort of digging into and finding just some amazing insights in Megillas Esther. So before we can look at the Sfas Emes, we really sort of need to look at the psukim and understand the context, because the Sfas Emes, and I think this is recorded by his Talmidim, but the way they recorded it is very terse. It sort of leaves a lot to be sort of figured out. So the first pasuk, and what he's doing is he's going to look at he's going to compare the language in two different psukim, and so the first pasuk is Esther talking to Mordechai through through their messengers that they're going sort of back and forth and passing messages back and forth, and Mordechai says to Esther, you need to go into Achashverosh and get this decree lifted, right? And Esther sends back that, okay, finally she agrees, and she says, Lech kenos es kol hayudim animsim b'Shushan, right? You go and get everyone into who's in Shushan to fast, and we also, right? We also in the palace will be fasting for 3 days. And the key word here is hanim sa'im, those Jews that were found that are present in Shushan. Earlier on in Esther, right at the beginning of the Megillah, we're talking about the 6 months of festivities and that Achashverosh is having. It says at the end of that, so at the end of the 6-month period, Achashverosh then adds on another 7 days of festivities just for those people who were in Shushan. And again, we're seeing the word hanim sa'im b'Shushan. So this is what the Sfas Emes is sort of, he's taking a look at that and seeing that connection, and he's going to do some amazing things. So he says knos v'chule. So he's quoting the first pasuk we just looked at. Kol hayudim hanim sa'im b'Shushan, that all those in Shushan should fast. So he says, Ki hevinu she'agzera haya al yedei hachet shenehenu ma'osa seuda shel Achashverosh. So he's quoting, without really quoting, but he's quoting the Chazal that say that what was the problem, like what sort of sets this whole story off, is at the beginning of the Megillah, we have this huge feast, this festivity that's going on where all of the Jews who are in Shushan take part in it, and that was a mistake. That was a chait that they did. They should not have done so. So he says that we understood that the gezerah of Haman, his gezerahs, why did they happen? Why was Haman allowed to make these gezerahs against us? It's because of our chait that we partook in that seuda of Achashverosh. So he says, "V'lechei ne'amar le'el asa v'chulei l'chol hanimtzei meshushan ki mishta v'chulei." So he says that's the connection he's starting to make, that all of those who are found in Shushan who took part in the feast are now also those who are going to be fasting, right? So there's a connection there. Okay. But v'chein kan hanimtzayim. So there's our connection. Shezakoi al b'nei Yisrael. Now we're talking specifically about the b'nei Yisrael who were found in Shushan, who happened to be, or not happened, but chose to be in the feast, the festivities of Achashverosh. They will also be fasting on behalf of Esther, as she does so as well before she goes into Achashverosh. So Kamosha Darshu Chachamim b'Pasuk. So now he's going to take this to the next level, though. Okay, so now we have a connection that's kind of nice. We can see maybe a little bit of a hemshich of just how the story is developing. But now he's going to go even further, and he's going to say, wait a second here, what does the word hanimtza'im mean? Is there something else that we should be aware of? And he says, absolutely there is. So he says, Kamosha Dorshu Chachamim Pasuk Shnei Berosecha Hanimtza'os. So this is talking about, I don't have the quote here, but this is talking about, now we have to go back into Bereshis, back into the story of Lot and his two daughters that are in the house with Lot when the Malachim come to Sodom and they say, it's time to go. It's morning. It's time for us to overturn the city. And so you, your wife, and the two daughters who are found in the house. Now, there's a chazal on this piece, and that I have here. It's quoted in Bereshis Rabbah about this pasuk. It says, "Ve'es shtei benosecha hanimtzaos." So the Medrash says, "Amar Rav Tuvia bar Rabbi Yitzchak shtei mitzios." What does it mean? The two that are found in this house. Now, there's a separate Medrash that says that he had other daughters that were married that were not living in the house. Okay, so under shot we understand that that's what it's meaning, but Rav Tuvia bar Rabbi Yitzchak says there's something else that's going on here that we can be dorish over here, and that's that there are two outcomes. Nimtzaim also can be from the language of mitzios or totzaot, the outcomes of these two daughters. And what are the outcomes of these two daughters? Rus hamoaviyah v'noama ha'amonis. So that's a separate piece of chazal. But what the Sfas Emes is showing us here is that the word hanimtzaim can mean something very different. It becomes a sort of a key here, a code that we can pull from. So he says, so just to jump back up, so he says, so now going back to our story, the fasting that we did, the 3 days of fasting that Esther proclaimed, that was to do tshuva because of the chait of eating at the feast of Achashverosh. So that's again how we understand that connection and how it sort of comes out. Now he says, now this is where he's using that other piece of chazal, and this is where it's just amazing. He says v'hu pella, and now here's a wonder I'm going to share with you. Sheba'oso hamishte atzma na'aseh ha'hatzalah shenerga Vashti oz. He says, think back now, what happens at that party? Vashti is killed. And Vashti being killed leads to what? Esther coming and taking her place so that she can go into Achashverosh, so that she can fast 3 days before she goes into Achashverosh. So, so sorry, he's going to jump into something else now. But now what we're seeing is that there's already an outcome that the outcome is that those who are found in Shushan were at the feast, and Hashem is creating a situation where Esther is already going to save us from that chait. Now, he's going to explain this a little bit more. He says, "V'zehu ke'ein amram za b'tshuva meyahava." So there's a Gemara that says in Yuma, it says, "Gedola tshuva shezidonos nasis lo kazechuyos." That there's an amazing thing about tshuva. Now we have to understand what this means, and that's what he's going to give us a little bit of an insight into. But somehow tshuva can take a zadon, meaning something, a chait that you do purposefully, right? You know that it's a chait, you do it anyway. And the Gemara says that can be made into a merit. So how can a zadon, you do tshuva and your zadon becomes a merit? So he says, Hazadonos nebchu lezechuyos v'HaKadosh Baruch Hu ra sheyeshuva b'tshuva shlema. Hashem saw in the future. He knew that we were going to do tshuva for going to Achashverosh's feast, for partaking in it. V'nir shelakach tiknu zeh hayom lemisha. Sorry, it's hard for me to fill in enough gaps before he jumps onto the next piece of it. So what he's saying is that ke'ein zeh, that we can turn through tshuva, we can turn a zadon into a zechus. That's what Hashem is showing us by anticipating that we are going to do tshuva later, and even at the feast, he creates a situation where Vashti is killed so that Esther can take her place, so that we can then do tshuva, and we can wind up where we need to be, which is having our representative Esther showing up in front of Achashverosh, pleading on our behalf.
Jeff, can I ask a basic question?
Please,
what was the violation for participating in the feast? Was it hedonistic? Was it non-kosher food? What was the overt violation?
Yeah, beautiful question. Beautiful question. So it doesn't seem to be a problem of kosher food or even of wine, right? That's because it's made very clear in the psukim that it's not that wasn't the issue. The issue was, why are we there in the first place? I think that was really the problem, where we see these interesting connections between what Achashverosh is doing in his palace and sort of creating what looks to us like something that's akin to the Beis Hamikdash, right? We see some interesting parallels, right, in terms of the this is what Chazal bring out. That's not my my own opinion, but this is what Chazal bring out, is that the palace that Achashverosh spends a lot of time recreating, himself to be. There's talk about why his throne was in Shushan. Why wasn't it in Babylonia anymore? Right? It's because there's a famous medrash that says that he built a throne that was just like Shlomo HaMelech's throne, and he couldn't move it. It was so ornate, it couldn't be moved. So he built a palace around it. But there's clearly these ideas that he's sort of creating a sort of Beis Hamikdash replacement, and the fact that we're partaking in there is almost as if we're showing that we're happy to be in Galus. We're happy to be in your palace, in your version of what a Beis Hamikdash could be, or something like that. So it seems like that's more the problem, is that is that sort of playing along with and taking this seriously, what Achashverosh is doing.
Got it. Thank you. In the law, we call that aiding and abetting.
Yeah, for sure. And as opposed to keeping our distance and saying, no, you want to do that craziness, that's fine. I mean, I think we see a lot of these parallels today too. Like it's hard. We're so embedded into our society around us that sometimes it's hard for us to sort of disconnect and say, hey, wait a second, what's going on in the outside world is really not, doesn't really fit with how we think about our values and Torah values and that sort of thing. So I think that seems to be the problem. Specifics I don't know, but that seems to be, at least at a high level, what the problem was. So let's finish this piece. And he says, okay, V'nir shalkach tiknu zehayom lemishta. Now he says another amazing, I think, an amazing insight, right? If you think about it, what are some of the biggest mitzvahs, or what are the 4 mitzvahs that we have, or one of the 4 mitzvahs we have in Purim is the Suda. And in some ways, the Seuda is a really key and important part of the day. It's a Yom HaMishta. Why is it a Yom HaMishta, right? I mean, some will ask that question, like, wait a second here. Achashverosh made a Yom HaMishta. Why are we making a Yom HaMishta? But that's the idea, is that the Zadonos that we do becomes Zechuyos. And so this becomes a merit for us. Making this into a day of Mishta is also a merit for us as well. That's what the Sfas Emes seems to be saying. Because he changed, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was able to change the chet of the Mishta through tshuva, into a zechus. So now we're taking that same zechus and we're running with it. This is now our zechus in a Mishta. Obviously a very different type of Mishta. We should be, it should be done with Torah values and with singing Jewish songs and talking about Divrei Torah and all that. So very different from Achashverosh's, but that's what we're doing, is we're taking that same thing and we're turning it into our own zechus. It says V'yesh lomar she'zeh perish ha'pasuk u'v'chein avo el hamelech asher lo kedas. Now he says another thing that's, again, sort of takes a little bit of interpretation, but we know that there's an idea in Chazal that Hashem's name is never mentioned in the entire Megillas Esther, but the word Melech is said a lot. And so there's this idea of an allegory, I think that's the right word, that every time we see the word Melech, we could look at it as HaKadosh Baruch Hu, meaning that, not within the story itself, but sort of taking it up at a more abstract view, and we can change that and see that there is, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in the story if we look at it more abstractly. So he says, "V'yesh lomar zeh perish pasuk." This is the pasuk says that this is Esther talking again, and she says, therefore, after we fast for 3 days, I will go into the king asher lo kedas, that has not been approved. Right? I haven't been invited into the king. So he says, perish shehis karbus el habore yisborach, meaning she's saying, I'm going to go in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so coming close to Hashem, she's coming close to Hashem through by taking the chet itself. That's not kedas. That's not how you're supposed to do it. Al yedei tshuva canal, but you can do that with tshuva, and that's how you're able to come close to Hashem and to turn a zadon into a zechus. So he's using the pasuk itself as to sort of show an idea of that's what Esther is doing as she comes to Achashverosh. She's really coming to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with tshuva and turning that mishte, which was a zadon, into a zechus. So I hope I gave that over well. It's just amazing amazing insights, amazing way to think about these psukim in Megillas Esther. Okay, so that was our first piece, and I think we've got time to do one more. It's the same type of idea of what he's doing, where he's taking two psukim that don't seem to be relevant to each other, and he's connecting them together and giving us another insight. So he says, so the pasuk in the second chapter of Esther says, now, so what's going on here? So Esther has just been taken, amongst the pageantry, Esther is taken from her house, from where she lives with Mordechai, and she's taken into the palace to be part of the pageant of finding a new queen. So the pasuk says, "Uvechol yom vayom," every day, Mordechai mishalech lifnei chatzar beis hanoshim l'rasa shlom Esther uma ye'oseh ba. Every day he is walking, and it's interesting language, right? Uvechol yom vayom. It's not just saying Uvechol yom. It's like every day, every single day. There's not a day that's missed that Mordechai is walking. He's halech. He's not. He's an important person. He's the head of Sanhedrin. He seems to have some kind of a position within the palace as well, and yet he is strolling every day over to where the women are being kept, so that he can try to understand what is going on, looking after Esther in whatever means that he can do. Okay, and then we have another pasuk later on that says Vayhi be'amram or ke'amram elav yom vayom, when it's told to Haman every day, every single day, that's told to Mordechai every single day that you were supposed to be bowing to Haman. V'lo shama alehem, and he never listened. Mordechai never listened, and it made Haman very, very angry, right? So here's the Yom V'Yom. That's the connecting language between the two. So what's going on? And so he says, the Sfas Emes says, Yom V'Yom Mordechai mishalech nira shekol devarim nizkarim beMegillah haya hakol etzerech hanes. So he's asking a very simple question in some ways. He's saying this part of the storyline that Mordechai is going and it's all very nice that he's very concerned about Esther, his cousin, she's an orphan and all that. But what does it have to do with, this is Tanakh? If it's not telling us something that's very specific and crucial to the storyline, then why is it in here? And it doesn't seem to be. So what's going on? So clearly it is, right? That's what Sfas Emes is going to say. No, actually, this is incredibly important. Why? Shahaya, he says, think about it. How long has it been since that Mordechai is doing this? Because it says, the pasuk says very clearly, every single day. He's not missing a day. And he's doing this. And we know that the pageantry started in the third year, because that's the Megillah starts. So this is the third year of Achashverosh's reign. He has these parties for 6 months. He kills or does away with whatever ends up happening to Vashti, right? We don't know exactly, but she's gone. And then it says right away, he misses her after the parties end. He misses her, and he needs a new queen. And so they say, okay, we'll start to have these pageants, and we'll bring in the girls from Shushan, and etc. So that's the third year of his reign. And it says that when Esther is brought into his chambers, her turn comes up to be, looked at, or whatever it is that Achashverosh is doing, that's the 7th year. So we have 4, maybe depending on how the months work out, could be 4, somewhere between 4 and 5 years that Mordechai is doing this every single day, walking over to her, wherever she is living in part of the palace, in that compound. And he's doing this. He says that's an amazing, powerful thing, that this is what the head of the Sanhedrin is doing every day for 4 or 5 years. Why is he doing this? He's concerned about her. She's an orphan. She has nobody. And he wants to make sure that in some way she knows that he's looking after her. He wants to somehow have a connection with her. And we see later on that they do with the messengers, right? Ubitzar hatfisa bevesanachri. What's going on with her? She must be going through so much tsar because she was grabbed and brought into this, foreign palace, foreign home. Ubizchus zeh. So the Sfas Emes says an amazing thing. Because of this that Mordechai did, he was zoche to become part of the nace of Purim. Uksiv gamkim ba'amram elav yom v'yom. That's the connection to Haman. She'al yedei shebechol yom v'yom meshalech zaka l'natzech es Haman Russia. Because he's doing this every day for close to 4 or 5 years, that was his zechus to be able to overcome Haman HaRasha, lachisa b'chol yom v'yom, and make him so angry every day by not bowing down to him that that sort of puts into motion this whole showdown between Haman and Mordechai, where we see that Mordechai ends up triumphant. Why does all that happen? Why does Mordechai have any piece of this nace whatsoever? The Sfas Emes is telling us why. It's because of his zechus of looking after this yasam, this orphan, for 4 or 5 years, every day going there and looking after her. I heard, just to make this even more poignant, I heard Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson talk about this point. And he said, it's an amazing thing when we think about it, is the power of what we can do, and not something that we do in public, right? The public display of whatever. This is something that who knows, who even knew that Mordechai was doing this? This is something he decided to take on himself. It's something that he felt was important because she was an orphan and she needed him. And he said, what's an amazing thing for us to think about is, what we're able to do, even these private, what we might think of are small, small mitzvahs or what have you, but something that we're able to connect with somebody and help them and to have that Mesiras Nefesh, to do it for 4 or 5 years. The power of that, and what we see from the Megillas Esther, is that's why Mordechai was zocha. That's the reward for doing it, is that he was zocha to become part of the nace, that because of him comes the downfall of Haman and his gezeros. So we'll leave it with that. Yeah, please.
2 questions, 2 short questions.
Yeah.
Do we have any idea how old Esther is when she's selected as queen?
I'm not aware. I haven't seen anything about her age at any point in the story. And yeah. I mean, there's a midrash that says that she's married to Mordechai, but I don't, so she seems to be an adult, obviously, but I
don't 12. She could be 12.
She could be 12. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How do we know that Vashti was killed?
We don't. We just know that she was done away with. The assumption is that she was probably executed. It seems more likely that he would have probably executed, especially when we look at who she was, right? He himself was somehow a leader, clearly, to have wed Vashti, but Vashti is the one who has the royalty. She is the granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar. So her royalty goes to her. So it seems implausible that he wouldn't have had her executed just because she would be, she's royalty. Would he banish her? She might come back and be a threat. I don't know. I'm just sort of throwing that in there, but I think the assumption is that she was executed. But we don't know that for sure.